Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Office of Tax Appeals. We're about to begin oral hearing proceedings for the appeal of JetSource Inc., which will be live streamed, and the stenographer will transcribe everything that is said. The transcript is part of the public record and will be posted on our website. Our stenographer today is Ms. Alonso, who is reporting this hearing verbatim. Please help her to make an accurate record by speaking clearly, loudly, and one at a time. Please do not interrupt another speaker. When needed, Ms. Alonso will stop the hearing process and ask for clarification. After the hearing, Ms. Alonso will produce the official transcript, which will be available on the Office of Tax Appeals website. The Office of Tax Appeals is not a court. It is an administrative tribunal staffed by tax experts and is completely independent of the state's tax agencies. In response to COVID-19, the Office of Tax Appeals will be conducting today's hearing electronically with the agreement of the participants. Because these hearings are being conducted electronically, I'd like to offer a few reminders to help the process run as smoothly as possible. First thing you need to do is to state your name before you speak, and you need to do that every time. This is especially important because some participants may only have an audio connection. For this reason, the chat feature in Webex is disabled. Please mute your microphone if you are not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. You may press and hold the space bar to unmute. Finally, I should caution participants that anything visible to your camera and any documents that you display on your screen will be visible to the public, and not just in real time today, but for as long as the hearing is available to be viewed online. Are there any questions before we go on the record? Hearing none, Madam Stenographer, let's go on the record. Again, welcome to the Office of Tax Appeals hearing in the appeal of JetSource Inc., Office of Tax Appeals, or OTA case number 18053-102. Today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021, and the time is approximately 1:56 p.m. This hearing was noticed for Cerritos, California, but it is being conducted electronically with the agreement of the parties. Today's hearing is being heard by a panel of 3 administrative law judges. My name is Mike Geary, and I will take the lead in conducting the hearing today. I'm joined on the panel by Josh Aldrich and Richard Tay. After the hearing, the 3 of us will discuss the arguments and evidence. Each of us will have an equal voice in that discussion, and at least 2 of us must agree on the issue or issues presented. Any of us on the panel may ask questions today or otherwise participate to ensure that we have all the information that we need to decide the appeal. Now let's have the parties identify themselves by stating their names and who they represent, starting with the appellant.
Janet Pass, representing JetSource Inc.
I'm Stephen Smith, representing California Department of Tax and Fee Administration.
And I'm Jason Parker, also with the CDTFA.
Judge Geary, again, thank you all. It's my understanding that there will be no witnesses today and that we will hear only oral arguments. Ms. Pass, is that correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Smith, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. The exhibits marked thus far for identification in this appeal consist of appellant's exhibits marked 1 and 2, and respondent's exhibits marked A through E. All exhibits have been previously disclosed and discussed, and the parties have not raised any objection thus far to the proposed exhibits. But let me ask each of you, Ms. Pass, do you have any objection to the admission of respondent's exhibits A through E?
I have no objection.
Thank you, Judge Geary again. And Mr. Smith, do you have any objections to the admission of appellant's exhibits marked 1 and 2?
No objections.
Thank you. I am admitting all of the exhibits now. There's one issue to be decided in this appeal, and that is whether appellant is entitled to an adjustment to the amount of disallowed credits for sales tax prepaid to fuel distributors. Ms. Pass, can I confirm that with you that that is the sole issue to be decided today?
That is confirmed.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, do you agree?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. This is Judge Geary again. For time estimates, we've previously gone over this at pre-hearing conferences. It's my understanding that appellants have indicated they will require no more than 15 minutes for their first argument, their opening argument, and that respondent has indicated it will require no more than 15 minutes for its only argument. And I've indicated to appellant that it's at its option, Ms. Pass can take approximately 5 minutes for a final rebuttal argument if she chooses to do that. Ms. Pass, are these time limitations suitable for your needs?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, are they suitable for your needs?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. And I think we're ready to proceed. Ms. Pass, you can begin your argument when you are ready.
Janet Pass, presenting for JetSource. Our issue at hand is whether or not JetSource was the party legally entitled to take a credit for prepaid sales taxes that they paid to their vendor. JetSource operated a facility in Carlsbad, and they purchased fuel from Epic Aviation for resale. They paid prepaid sales tax on all of their purchases from Epic. They sold most of their fuel to others at retail and charged sales tax and took the prepaid credit. They also had a contract with another company called Schubach that operated at their facility, and they sold them fuel as well, although Schubach resold that fuel to others. JetSource should have had an SG account and did not. And under the terms of their contract with Schubach, they invoiced them an amount and then was also entitled to an extra fee. We believe that JetSource was the party entitled to take the prepaid sales tax credit because the hangar contract was silent and JetSource did not invoice Schubach for any sales tax on the invoices. The state came in and audited and allowed Schubach to take the prepaid sales tax credit that was invoiced to JetSource by Epic Aviation. No prepaid sales tax was ever invoiced to Schubach by JetSource, but the company was allowed to take the prepaid amounts paid by JetSource to Epic under what we understand is a theory by the CDTFA that they could impute that Schubach had in fact been charged prepaid sales tax while neither the invoice nor the hangar contract supports that. Exhibit 1 shows our hangar contract, and it is absolutely silent as to sales tax. During what was the BOE audit, they agreed that JetSource resold fuel to Schubach, and therefore regular sales tax was not assessed, and those transactions were treated as resale. But the contract was absolutely silent as to the right of reimbursement. CRTC 6012 provides that for purposes of sales tax, if the retailer is established to the satisfaction of the board that sales tax has been added to the total amount of the sales price and has not been absorbed by them, the total amount of the sales price shall be deemed to be the amount received exclusive of the tax imposed. Section 1656.1 of the Civil Code applies in determining whether or not retailers have absorbed the sales tax. Civil Code 1656.1 is very clear as to when a vendor is entitled to sales tax reimbursement and when an amount is deemed tax inclusive. Under 1656.1 subsection 1, it says that tax reimbursement may be added if the agreement of sale expressly provides for the addition of sales tax reimbursement. Our hangar contract is absolutely silent as to sales tax. There's no mention of tax anywhere in Exhibit 1. And so our contract clearly doesn't provide for sales tax reimbursement consistent with 1656.1. The second point is sales tax reimbursement is shown on the sales check or proof of sale. All of the invoices issued by JetSource to Shubat have no sales tax listed. They list an amount for the fuel, but there is no separate line item for sales tax, nor is there any language anywhere that says that the price is inclusive of either prepaid sales tax or other sales tax. The third point under 1656.1 is the retailer posts in his or her premises in a location visible to purchases or includes on a price tag or in an advertisement or other printed material directed to purchasers a notice to the effect reimbursement for sales tax will be added to the sales price of all items or certain items, whichever is applicable. That did not occur either. And then the final point is it shall be presumed the property, the gross receipts from the sale of which is subject to sales tax is sold at a price which includes tax reimbursement if the retailer posts in his or her premises or includes on a price tag or other advertisement one of the following notices. All prices of taxable items include sales tax reimbursement or the price includes sales tax reimbursement. None of the criteria under 1656.1 were met by the invoices or contracts between Shubat and JetSource. So I think it is clear that no prepaid sales tax was invoiced to Shubat, and therefore allowing them to take a prepaid credit for taxes that were paid by JetSource is improperly allowing a third party credit for taxes that they were not the party to have paid. It's important to note that based on civil code, JetSource did not charge or include sales tax on those sales, and there's no evidence to support prepaid sales tax was added or included in the JetSource invoices. I think that when we look at it, the contract with JetSource and Shubat, there's an argument that Shubat may have been charged too much, but it wasn't tax that they were charged. While the price may have been inclusive of the amounts that they paid to Epic, it was not invoiced nor inferred that tax was being charged to Shubat in any way. During our hearing, the CDTFA auditor denied our appeal based on his interpretation of California Revenue and Taxation Code 6480.1D, where he says the petitioner is only allowed to claim a credit on its Schedule G for sales taxes prepaid to vendors on fuel which is subsequently sold at retail and is prohibited from claiming credits for sales taxes prepaid to vendors for fuel that is sold at wholesale. A reading of the actual language of CRTC 6481.D does not contain any language that limits the petitioner's ability to claim a prepaid sales tax for wholesale sales. In fact, 6480.1D states that the amount of a prepayment paid by a retailer or a supplier or wholesaler who has consumed the motor vehicle fuel, aircraft jet fuel, or diesel fuel to the seller from whom he or she acquired the fuel shall constitute a credit against his or her sales and use tax due and payable for the period in which the sale was made. The statute provides the credit for the prepaid taxes as allowable against taxes due and payable for the reporting period, and the statutory language of 6480 does not limit the prepayment credit in the manner asserted by the hearing officer during our appeals. We believe that JetSource did not meet the California Civil Code's requirement to support that the gross receipts billed to Shubat included sales tax, either as a separate item or that it can be said that the price included the prepayment of sales taxes and that Shubat was placed on notice that the prices being billed included sales tax. We did not post any statement, nor did we inform them that taxes were included in that amount. Since California tax law is clear that a credit may be only taken for taxes paid by the company that actually paid the tax to the vendor, we believe there is no basis in the California Revenue and Taxation Code to allow a third party such as Shubat to claim a credit for taxes paid by JetSource to its vendor Epic. It is clear that JetSource paid Epic and that no tax was invoiced to Shubat by JetSource. For the reasons we just noted, JetSource should be allowed the credit claim for the prepaid sales taxes that they paid to Epic and did not invoice to Shubat. That concludes my presentation.
This is Judge Gary. Thank you, Ms. Pass. Let me just check with my my colleagues to find out if they have any questions. Judge Tay, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Judge Aldrich, do you have any questions at this time?
This is Judge Aldrich. I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Judge Geary speaking. Mr. Smith, are you ready to give the respondent's argument?
Yes.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Smith from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration's Legal Division, and with me is Jason Parker. We believe this appeal should be denied. Appellant is a jet charter company that makes retail and wholesale sales of jet fuel. It is undisputed that in all the transactions that are subject to this appeal, Appellant purchased jet fuel from a wholesaler, Epic Aviation, and made sales for resale of jet fuel to just one customer, Schubach Aviation, as shown in Exhibit A. As relevant here, a supplier of jet fuel is required to prepay sales tax to CDTFA on its first distribution of fuel and is required to collect a prepayment of a portion of the sales tax due for each gallon of fuel that the supplier sells to another seller. For subsequent sales, each seller other than the retailer also pre-collects sales tax. The retailer, who thereafter makes the retail sale of jet fuel, owes sales tax on the retail sales price of the fuel and is entitled to claim a credit against its sales tax liability for the sales tax prepaid to its vendor in the period in which the retail sale is made. Pursuant to Subdivision D of Revenue and Taxation Code Section 6480.1, the only person who can claim a credit against its sales or use tax liability for the sales tax prepaid to its vendor is a person who actually has a tax liability. Typically, that is a retailer who claims the credit against their sales tax liability for the retail sale of the fuel, but it can also be a supplier, wholesaler, or retailer who consumes fuel and thus has a use tax liability. Here, there's no dispute that appellant regarded its sales to Schubach Aviation as non-taxable sales for resale, and that Schubach Aviation reported and paid sales tax or use tax with respect to the fuel in question. Because appellant reported and paid no tax with respect to the fuel in question, there is no tax against which appellant can claim a credit. If appellant were allowed to claim a credit for the fuel in question when appellant did not pay tax with respect to that fuel, appellant would in substance receive a refund of tax it never paid. Accordingly, appellant is not entitled to claim the credit against its non-taxable sales to Schubach. Further, Exhibit E shows that contrary to appellant's contentions, appellant collected an amount that included prepaid sales tax from Schubach. The invoices contained in Exhibit E show that appellant purchased fuel from Epic Aviation for a price that included a line item for prepaid sales tax, and that same fuel was then sold to Schubach Aviation for the exact same price. While appellant sales invoices to Schubach Aviation did not include a separate line item for prepaid sales tax, the sales price appellant charged Schubach for the fuel fully reimbursed appellant for the prepaid sales tax it paid to Epic Aviation. That is why the department concluded that Schubach paid an amount that included prepaid sales tax and allowed Schubach's reported credit of prepaid sales tax against its reported sales and use tax liability for the fuel in question. Even if, for the sake of argument, it were the case that appellant did not collect sales tax prepayments from Schubach, appellant would still not be entitled to the credit because appellant did not make retail sales or consumption of the fuel in question and does not have a sales or use tax liability that it can take a credit against. Again, Subdivision D of Section 6480.1 provides that the only person who can claim a credit against its sales or use tax liability for the sales tax prepaid to its vendor is a person who has an actual tax liability. Consistent with this, Subdivision C of Section 6480.1 provides that a wholesaler may claim a credit for prepaid sales tax for fuel itself consumes, but only if the wholesaler reports and pays use tax to CDTFA on the consumption of that fuel. Because it is undisputed that appellant did not report and pay tax with respect to the transactions at issue, appellant cannot claim the credit. Therefore, this appeal should be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Let me just check with my colleagues again. Judge Aldrich, do you have any questions of the respondent?
This is Judge Aldrich. I don't have any questions for a respondent. Thank you.
Judge Tay, do you have any questions for respondent?
This is Judge Tay. I have no questions.
Thank you, Judge Geary, again. Ms. Pass, would you can give a brief rebuttal if you would like to. Would you like to?
I would.
You may proceed.
Mr. Smith notes that you are only entitled to a credit if you self-consume the fuel or you charge tax. The prepaid fuel statutes provide that you may also take a credit when you sell it for an exempt use. There are sales to the state of California and others where if you have prepaid the tax, you are allowed to take the credit even though your subsequent sale is exempt. And so therefore it isn't limited to only retail sales as Mr. Smith has stated. I think it is undisputed that we did not procedurally do things correctly, but I still do not think that it is correct to say that we charged Schubach prepaid sales tax since the civil code requirements were not met. I think from a contractual standpoint, we have overcharged Schubach and they have a civil position, had it been in statute, to request a refund of the amounts overcharged, but to impute that it was sales tax that they actually paid rather than they were invoiced too much money, since we did not actually have the ability nor did we charge prepaid tax, is an incorrect interpretation of our invoices and misstates the facts and the invoices themselves. The state is imputing that because we overbilled Schubach, that therefore we must have charged them tax, but the law is very clear as to when taxes deemed to have been charged or included, and JetSource's invoices to Schubach do not meet those requirements, and therefore it is unreasonable to assert that those amounts included tax when we don't meet the requirements to have taken a credit for tax included invoices. We did overcharge Schubach, and that is, undeniable, but it's whether or not we can say those amounts are sales tax just because that's the amount we overcharged them by. We did not put them on notice, nor were they told that sales tax was charged, and so they should not have been allowed a credit for it. We should have been allowed the credit for those taxes, and we believe it isn't limited solely to retailers because there are provisions for a prepaid credit for those who are selling fuel in an exempt manner after they purchase it at wholesale. It's not just for retail sales and consumers. And that concludes my rebuttal.
This is Judge Geary. Thank you, Ms. Pass. Again, I will ask my colleagues if they have any questions. Judge Aldrich, do you have any questions?
This is Judge Aldrich. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Geary. Again, Judge Tay, do you have any questions?
This is Judge Tay. No, I don't think I have any questions. Thank you.
Judge Geary, I have a couple of questions or one or two questions. Ms. Pass, looking at the hangar lease agreement, it provides that Schubach and JetSource were going to purchase fuel together. I think the words are that Schubach agreed to purchase fuel in conjunction with the landlord being JetSource. What does that language mean? What did it mean to your client?
It meant that it was going to sell fuel that was held in the JetSource tanks to its tenant, Schubach. The original one was that Schubach was going to purchase their own fuel direct, and instead they chose to purchase it from JetSource.
Judge Geary again. So rather than changing the contract to indicate that occupants agree to purchase fuel from JetSource, somebody decided to put occupants agree to purchase fuel in conjunction with JetSource, you're saying that the two things that I just said mean the same things, at least did to your client?
To our client, they treated it as if they were making sales for resale to Schubach. They didn't look at that they were making joint purchases. They treated it as sales and they invoiced Schubach for each and every purchase. Whereas if they were treating it as each one was buying it together, then there would be no need for them to be invoicing Schubach. They would just allocate the purchases without invoices. But from an accounting standpoint, those transactions with Schubach were treated as sales and invoices were issued and revenue was booked. Not that they each purchased a segment of the fuel.
Okay, Judge Gary again, thank you. You were talking about overcharges, or there may have been overcharges. JetSource paid a certain amount for the fuel, paid the prepaid sales tax on the fuel, and billed that exact same amount to Schubach when Schubach purchased fuel from JetSource. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Judge Gary, again, the hangar lease agreement, I think, indicates that JetSource would be allowed to charge a pumping fee or something like that, in addition to collecting its cost of the fuel itself. Is that fair? That it said it was going to collect a pumping fee. I think it was a pumping fee, something like that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you what was the pumping fee amount?
It was 25 cents per gallon if they purchased under 60,000 gallons per calendar month, and 35 cents per gallon if they purchased less than 60,000 gallons per month.
Thank you. And this is Judge Geary again. And your arguments about possible overcharging, your argument is that JetSource overcharged Schubach the pumping fee, which just happened to be equal to the sales tax that had been prepaid?
No, the pumping fee is separate. That is something we are entitled to. If you look at, and I think that the hangar lease is fairly, it isn't terribly clear that it must be sold at cost, and it clearly doesn't address any type of taxes. But if one were to make the argument that they were supposed to sell it at cost, and that's really not all that clear in the language here, then that prepaid sales tax either should have been line item invoiced, which it wasn't, or the fuel should have been invoiced at an amount excluding the tax that they had paid to Epic. But they grossed it up to include that amount that they paid to Epic, because that's how Schubach looked at Schubach. That's how JetSource looked at. That was their cost to acquire that fuel. I think a reasonable person, if the two parties were sitting down, would say the amount we should have paid you should have been net of that prepaid amount, and therefore JetSource should have refunded potentially that amount. And I think that is a civil matter between the parties, but potentially they may have been liable to reimburse Schubach for that amount, but I don't think that the state can step in and say, we're going to treat that as tax and we're going to allow Schubach to take the credit for taxes that were paid by JetSource and not Schubach.
Thank you.
No
Thank you,
other
Judge Geary.
transaction do I
Go
believe
ahead.
allow that.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I thought you were done. Go ahead and say that again.
I'm sorry. In no other type of transaction would they allow a third party to take credit for taxes that were paid by the vendor in this manner. The CDTFA is imputing that the amount was charged as tax and therefore allowing the third party to take a tax credit. But the invoices, both Epic issued as well as the invoices that JetSource issued to Schubach, are clear that the only party that actually paid tax as listed was JetSource to Epic. There was no tax charged or paid from JetSource on the invoices to Schubach, and therefore no credit should have been allowed to Schubach.
Thank you, Judge Geary again. just to follow up on something you said that the pumping fee was something entirely separate. Are you saying that in addition to the price that appeared on the invoices between JetSource and Chubak, that JetSource separately billed and invoiced a pumping fee?
No, I believe that the amount on the invoices is inclusive of the pumping fee.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions that I have. Let me just make sure, open it up to my colleagues again. Judge Tay, do you have any questions?
I have no questions at this time. This is Judge Tay. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Gary. Again, Judge Aldrich, do you have any questions?
All right, this is Judge Aldrich. No questions, thanks.
Thank you. All right, bear with me a moment. This concludes the oral argument in this case. Let me just confirm with Ms. Pass, does your client submit the matter for decision?
We submit the matter for decision.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith, does CDTFA submit the matter for decision?
Yes, we submit the matter for submission.
This case is submitted on June 15th, 2021 at approximately 2:24 p.m. The record in this appeal is now closed. I want to thank everyone for participating. In the coming weeks, the panel will meet to consider the matter, and we will issue and mail to you a written opinion within 100 days. Today's hearing in the appeal of JetSource Inc. is now adjourned. For the benefit of, let's go off the record, please, Ms. Alonso. For the benefit of anyone watching these hearings, this concludes our hearings today. At this point, I believe there's one matter remains on the calendar for tomorrow at 1 p.m. And I want to thank everybody who participated today for their participation. And I hope you all have a pleasant remainder of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.